The tent had been cut open from the inside, not torn by wind, not ripped by animals. A clean, deliberate slash, made by the people who were supposed to be sheltering inside it. Outside, the temperature had fallen to nearly minus 30 degrees Celsius. The wind moved like a blade across the slope of a silent mountain. Footprints led away from the tent, bare feet, socks, a single boot among them, descending into darkness. Whoever left that tent had not dressed. They had not taken supplies. They had not even taken time to think. And yet, there were no signs of a struggle inside. No blood. No evidence of an attack. Only the quiet, flattened impression of 9 people who had lain down to sleep. And then, for some reason no one has ever fully explained, cut their way out into the freezing night. The mountain where it happened would later be given a name by investigators and journalists: Dyatlov Pass. But on that night in 1959, it was only a remote slope in the northern Ural Mountains, and no one yet knew what had begun there. In late January 1959, 9 experienced hikers set out on a winter expedition across the Ural Mountains of the Soviet Union. They were young, students and graduates of the Ural Polytechnic Institute, skilled, disciplined, and accustomed to extreme conditions. This was not recklessness. It was ambition. Their leader, Igor Dyatlov, was 23 years old, quiet, methodical, respected. The kind of person who checked equipment twice, who mapped routes carefully, who believed in preparation over luck. The others trusted him completely. They traveled by train, then truck, then on skis, moving deeper into a region of forests, frozen rivers, and wind-carved ridges. Photographs taken along the way show them laughing, repairing gear, sharing food, writing in journals. There was music on a small mandolin, jokes written in diaries, footprints trailing through snow that seemed endless. Nothing about those early days suggested danger. They pitched tents, cooked meals, navigated carefully. They were cold, certainly, but cold was expected. Fatigue was expected. Hardship was part of the purpose. Their final destination was a mountain known as Autorten. The name, translated loosely from the local Mansi language, meant something like, "Don't go there." But names are often poetic, and the hikers were scientists at heart. They believed in maps and measurements, not omens. On February 1st, they began ascending the slope of a mountain called Koletsyakol. Its name meant Mountain of the Dead. Still, nothing seemed wrong. Not yet. That afternoon, weather conditions worsened. Wind intensified, snow thickened, visibility narrowed to a white haze. Instead of descending into the forest for shelter, Dyatlov made a decision. They would camp on the exposed slope. Perhaps he did not want to lose altitude. Perhaps he believed conditions would improve by morning. Perhaps it simply seemed manageable at the time. They pitched the tent on the incline, cutting into the snow to create a flat surface. Photographs recovered later show the tent standing alone against an empty horizon, the sky already fading toward dusk. Inside, they removed boots, arranged gear, prepared to sleep. Sometime during the night, something happened. No one knows exactly when. What is known comes from the evidence left behind. At some point, the hikers cut their way out of the tent, not through the entrance, but through the fabric itself. Multiple slashes, made quickly, urgently. They climbed out into the storm. Footprints later found in the snow showed that they did not run immediately. They walked, descending in a line toward the forest, nearly a kilometer away, barefoot, underdressed, silent. At the edge of the forest, investigators later found the remains of a small fire beneath a cedar tree. Broken branches above suggested that 2 of the hikers had climbed upward, perhaps searching for the tent or watching for something in the distance. Nearby lay their bodies. Others were found scattered between the tree and the tent, as if attempting to return. 3 more were discovered months later, buried under deep snow in a ravine. Some of the injuries were unlike anything the search teams expected. massive internal trauma, fractured ribs, a crushed skull. Yet in many cases, almost no external wounds. One victim was missing her tongue, and through it all, there were no signs of another group. No tracks beyond their own, only the wind and silence. At first, investigators believed they understood what had happened. An avalanche. It seemed logical. A slab of snow collapsing onto the tent could have forced the hikers to cut their way out quickly, fearing suffocation. Disoriented in darkness and storm, they might have fled downhill, becoming lost, succumbing to cold. For a time, this explanation felt sufficient. Avalanches were known in mountainous terrain. Panic was human. Hypothermia could cause irrational behavior, even the paradoxical urge to remove clothing. But as the investigation continued, the avalanche theory began to weaken. There was no significant debris around the tent. The slope angle was relatively shallow. Footprints remained visible for hundreds of meters, something unlikely after a large slide. Most troubling of all, the tent itself had not been crushed. If an avalanche had struck, where was the evidence? The explanation that once seemed clear began to dissolve, leaving behind only more questions. Over the decades, many theories have emerged, each attempting to explain pieces of the mystery, but never all of it. One possibility is environmental. A rare wind phenomenon known as a katabatic wind, or even infrasound caused by wind patterns over the mountain, could have produced intense fear or disorientation. Under such conditions, the hikers might have experienced overwhelming panic, an irrational but powerful urge to escape the tent immediately. This could explain the sudden flight, the lack of proper clothing, the hurried descent. But it does not explain the severe internal injuries found in some of the bodies. Nor does it explain why several hikers moved toward the ravine rather than remaining near the fire. Panic may begin chaos, but it does not always sustain it for hours in freezing darkness. Another theory suggests human involvement. In 1959, this region of the Soviet Union was not entirely isolated from military activity. Some have proposed that the hikers may have encountered weapons testing, parachute mines, or classified exercises. Explosions in the air could account for internal injuries and radiation traces found on some clothing. This theory introduces motive for secrecy. Investigators at the time closed the case with an unusually vague conclusion that the hikers died due to a compelling natural force, not an avalanche, not exposure, a force. But if military testing were responsible, why were there no clear blast injuries? Why leave bodies scattered openly rather than removing evidence? And why were the footprints of only 9 people ever found? Then there are the more disturbing theories. Some suggest the hikers encountered something unknown in the forest that night, something that drove them from the tent in terror. Local Mansi tribes were briefly suspected, but there was no evidence of conflict, and the Mansi themselves assisted in search efforts. Others have spoken of strange lights reported in the sky around that time. Orange spheres seen by other hikers and by military personnel in the region. Lights that moved silently. Lights that left no explanation. But even these accounts remain fragmentary, uncertain, impossible to confirm. And so the question remains, quiet but persistent. What could frighten 9 experienced hikers enough to abandon shelter, step barefoot into a lethal storm, and never return? In the years since 1959, the Dyatlov Pass Incident has become one of the most studied mysteries of the 20th century. Files have been reopened, new analyses conducted, computer simulations run. Some modern researchers have proposed that a small slab avalanche, combined with wind patterns and terrain, may indeed explain part of what happened. A delayed collapse of snow could have created enough pressure to injure some hikers without leaving massive debris. It is a plausible reconstruction, and yet, plausibility is not certainty. Because the story is not only about physics or snowpack, it is about decisions made in darkness, about fear, about moments no one witnessed. Photographs recovered from the hikers' cameras show their final days. Faces smiling and blowing snow, footprints across white fields, a tent being raised against a pale sky. Ordinary moments, the last ordinary moments of their lives. The Soviet investigation closed quietly. Documents were archived. For decades, access was limited. Families were left with fragments, belongings returned, reports partially explained, questions that never stopped echoing. Today, visitors sometimes travel to Dyatlov Pass. The mountain remains silent, winds still sweeping across the same slope where the tent once stood. There is a memorial now, simple and solemn, bearing the names of the 9 hikers. The place does not feel dramatic. It feels empty. And perhaps that is what lingers most about this story. Not violence, not spectacle, but absence. 9 people lay down to sleep. Something happened in the night, and whatever it was, it left almost no trace. The tent, cut open from within, remains one of the most haunting details, because it suggests a moment, a single instant when fear overcame reason, when staying inside felt more dangerous than stepping into the freezing dark. What did they believe was outside that tent? Or worse, what did they believe was inside it with them? If stories like this stay with you, if you find yourself thinking about them long after the screen goes dark, there are more waiting to be explored. You can follow this channel to continue uncovering mysteries that history never fully explained. Stories where the answers remain just out of reach and the echoes of the unknown are still being heard.